Innocence is a camouflage trap, dressed in virtue but filled with vulnerabilities. The fool walks among others, believing that the transparency of his essence will be enough to secure a safe place in a world of interests. However, this belief is an open invitation to deceit. He is seen but not understood, heard but not truly listened to. The silent pain of being ignored runs deeper than many can imagine. There is nothing more devastating than realizing that trust was misplaced, that gestures of friendship were merely masks in a power play. When we observe social relationships, the complexity becomes palpable. Intentions are often disguised, and a lack of discernment allows betrayals to masquerade as alliances. Innocence, therefore, is not just a trait, it is a vulnerability that leads to ruin. True power is not evidenced by words, but by silent actions that reverberate. Every act of good faith can be turned against you if there is no strategic reading of the real intentions around you. The courage to remain silent can be your greatest weapon. While many speak, you observe. While most expose themselves, you learn. And therein lies the transformation. The fool can become a sage if he merely allows his experiences to shape him, accepting that one cannot be authentic without a keen awareness of the reality that surrounds us. After all, virtue without strategy is an invitation to self-destruction. They don't need to understand you. They only need to fear your absence. Fragility is a trait of the fool that becomes a risk. Naivety, when not accompanied by discernment, creates an opaque veil over the reality he inhabits. He believes that kindness is a shield, but in truth, it turns into bait. While he observes the world with eyes full of hope, others see him as an opportunity. His trust is not based on evidence, but rather on an innocent belief in altruism. It is a trap disguised as virtue. This social mechanism is insidious. The reciprocity that the fool longs for is often an illusion. Alliances formed under the light of honesty can quickly turn into snares, with Machiavellian intentions not always visible. In an environment where ambition is frequently cloaked by smiles, those who fail to read between the lines become targets. Loneliness creeps in, stemming from the deception he feeds by ignoring the fleet of interests around him. However, there is a way out. Recognizing vulnerability is the first step to reversing this fate. The fool can transform into someone more aware. Humility can align with cunning. Instead of being swept away by the currents of others' ambitions, he can choose to be the observer. True power does not reveal itself in spoken words, but in the silence that responds, in the absence of echo. Virtue without strategy makes you nothing more than a pawn on the chessboard of life. Be the silence that destabilizes. The innocence of the fool often transforms into his greatest weakness, not because he is inherently fragile, but because kindness, in a landscape of duplicity, becomes fertile ground for betrayal. He believes that goodness is a shield, yet in truth, it serves as a white flag of surrender. As he navigates a world filled with hidden agendas, he overlooks the fact that transparency can be easily manipulated. His vulnerability becomes a trap, with his trust inviting exploitation. The fool's apolitical behavior, his quest for acceptance and friendship, conceals a lethal weakness. He fails to see that many promises of loyalty are made solely to gain an advantage. Each act of good faith resembles an unprepared game of chess, direct moves that expose his most valuable pieces while others play in the shadows. What he perceives as friendship, others categorize as an opportunity for domination. In a world where every word is a calculated move, the absence of strategic reading reveals an imminent danger. However, transformation is possible. By recognizing that his innocence is a vulnerability, the fool can choose to evolve. He can learn that power does not manifest in gestures, but in the ability to discern between the real and the illusory. Ultimately, virtue without strategy is not virtue. It is disguised recklessness. A man who allows himself to be understood exposes his own vulnerabilities because in the silence of intentions, true strength resides. Power doesn't need an audience. It observes. The fool overlooks a simple truth. Silence often speaks louder than rehearsed rhetoric. He navigates a minefield where every smile is a disguised trap. His naivety is a tool that others' ambitions skillfully exploit. When a man is unaware of hidden motivations, he becomes a saxophonist playing in an empty room. His music, melancholic and beautiful, finds no echo. The splendid confidence he projects is not a shield, it's a broken compass. The relationships surrounding him form an intricate web, woven by interests that leave no room for naive altruism. Those who present themselves as friends may well be wolves in sheep's clothing. Each gesture of friendship is scrutinized and assessed, a rigorous exchange of social capital. For those observing, intentions are laid bare in the subtext of every spoken word, while the fool sees only what is apparent. Here lies the paradox. His quest for acceptance makes him a hostage to those who know how to play the game. Transformation begins with recognizing this dynamic. When the fool learns to observe before exposing himself, he uncovers the powerful art of silence. The absence of voice can become his strongest ally, a cloak of invisibility that allows him to see the tactics that once eluded him. The true strength of power does not lie in boasting, but in the ability to remain detached, listening while others speak. You're not hard to love, you're just hard to deceive. The fool walks a path that seems illuminated by kindness, but in reality, it is a road paved with manipulation. Each smile that welcomes his presence is a puzzle. Behind the friendliness, what he fails to see is that many are ready to take advantage of his naivety. The pursuit of acceptance turns into a trap. The desire to belong to a social circle becomes his vulnerability, a temptation to exploit what is still pure and unprepared. He doesn't realize that by exposing his essence without resistance, he bids farewell to the power of discernment. He becomes an accomplice to his own ruin. With each interaction, a game is played, yet he lacks the pieces to participate. Promises of friendship often serve as a facade, and his innocence becomes a veil masking hidden intentions. The tragedy of the fool is his belief that pure goodness can prevail in a world where cunning reigns supreme. Transformation begins with the recognition of this dynamic. When he refuses to be the target, the fool can make himself invisible, observing all the moves around him. In the silence, he discovers what truly resonates. Power is not just about occupying a space, it's about knowing when to remain absent, allowing others to set the tone. Only by allowing himself this self-reflection does the fool become the wise one, an individual who, instead of succumbing to betrayal, rises above it. After all, true strength lies not in the expectation of acceptance from others, but in the assurance of his own silent integrity. Vulnerability is not weakness, it is the beginning of strength. The vulnerability that the fool carries turns out to be a double-edged sword. The quest for acceptance, fueled by an inherent desire to belong, becomes his greatest vice. Every smile he encounters is a potential friendship, every friendly word, an unasked promise. But the reality is harsh. Many of these promises are nothing more than camouflage traps, ready to ensnare the unprepared's naivety. This longing for acceptance creates a vicious cycle. Blind trust in others' intentions becomes an invitation to exploitation. The fool overlooks that true loyalty is a rare currency, seldom exchanged without a hidden cost. Hands that appear extended in solidarity may only be seeking an advantage. What he perceives as genuine friendship, others categorize as an opportunity for their own benefit. The game he remains unaware of is played on a board where the pieces move in strategic directions, and he, innocent, exposes his vulnerabilities without realizing what's at stake. The way out of this maze of manipulation begins with recognizing this dynamic. The fool must learn to position himself as an observer, to listen to what's left unsaid, to decode the silences that speak volumes. Power lies in retreating, in allowing others to reveal their true intentions while he waits in silence. And so, when someone believes their actions are harmless, he will know that true strength does not need to be proclaimed. It is silent and therefore devastating. The courage to stay silent can be your greatest weapon. In a world saturated with words, silence emerges as a quiet weapon. The fool often finds himself caught in his own need to be heard, believing that voicing the truth will bring acceptance and recognition. Yet this need is an illusion. Excessive talking is not a bridge, but a barrier. It reveals more about his insecurities than the power he truly possesses. Lacking the ability to read between the lines, he becomes a puppet, manipulated by those who play in the shadows. In any interaction, hidden intentions dance like invisible threads. What appears to be genuine friendship may well be a carefully laid trap. By exposing his fragility and trust without thought, the fool provides the necessary fuel for betrayal. True control is established through silence, where power lies not in dominating the conversation, but in absorbing the dynamics surrounding it. He learns that silence is not a sign of weakness, but the essential space for observation and interpretation. What you hear is only part of the conversation. What's absent, the pauses, the hesitations, and the silences, reveals what truly matters. When you become an unknown factor, your opponents become unsettled. Mastery lies not in being the loudest, but in being the most astute. Let others reveal their intentions while you observe in silence. True strength is revealed in the ability to transcend the need to be understood, and let absence become your greatest message. The tragedy of the fool is his inability to realize that innocence does not guarantee protection. Every gesture of goodwill can become a vulnerable point. In his constant quest for acceptance, the fool puts himself on display, his intentions exposed, while others play their games in the shadows. With every smile he receives, he sees friendship. Each seemingly kind word is an invisible thread that binds him, and this web is more complex than he can imagine. Behind every interaction lies a power struggle, and he unwittingly becomes the easiest piece to capture. This dynamic is cruel. The fool believes that his kindness is armor, but in reality, it is bait. When he reveals his vulnerabilities, he bids farewell to control, allowing others' manipulations to reach him. They do not care about his purity. They see only the opportunity to exploit his trust. The certainty he has about his relationships dissolves into betrayals. However, there is a way out. Transformation begins with recognizing the game. By letting go of the need for constant validation, the fool can adopt a more strategic stance. Silence becomes a powerful tool, allowing him to observe, learn, and ultimately define his own game. True strength does not lie in brute force, but in the ability to discern hidden intentions. Silence is your throne. In the emptiness of words, the truth reveals itself. In his quest for acceptance, the fool exposes his vulnerabilities, making himself an easy target in a ruthless game. Each interaction is a silent battlefield where observers benefit from the weaknesses of others. This reality is not a coincidence. It is a carefully orchestrated social structure. Innocence, far from being a virtue, morphs into bait as ambition lurks in the shadows, exploiting misplaced trust. The fool believes that kindness is his greatest asset, but this very trait, without discernment, turns him into a pawn on a chessboard. Here, smiles are distorted mirrors, reflecting only what serves others' interests. The desire to belong often becomes the trap that seals his fate. He doesn't realize that by giving himself fully, he bids farewell to clarity, sacrificing the ability to distinguish friends from foes. However, the transition to wisdom begins with a simple act: observation. The power to silence his insecurities can open up a new horizon. When the fool chooses not to play by the invisible rules of others, he gains the ability to read their intentions. True power isn't loudly proclaimed, it is built in the quiet of reflection. Thus, by becoming a cautious observer, the fool transforms into a strategist. He learns that true strength comes not from being seen, but from knowing when to become invisible. Be the silence that destabilizes,